Hey, welcome to Real Creepy Vids. My name is Steven. Tonight we have an especially terrifying true story about what many researchers have called the most paranormal location on the planet, Skinwalker Ranch in northeastern Utah. This isn't just another ghost story or cryptid sighting. What makes this case truly remarkable is that, unlike most paranormal claims, this property was subjected to a decade of scientific scrutiny by PhDs and researchers. What they discovered will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about our reality. Let's get started. In the northeastern corner of Utah, tucked away in the remote Uintah Basin, lies a 512-acre plot of arid land where Skinwalker Ranch sits in eerie isolation. Local residents have always given this area a wide berth, and after researching its history, it's not hard to understand why. The property, located near the small town of Ballard, has been the site of reported anomalies dating back well before European settlers arrived in the region. The ranch itself was constructed in the late 1800s to early 1900s, but the land carried a dark history long before the first foundation stones were laid. According to historical records from the 1850s, the area was considered cursed even then, with early Mormon settlers reporting strange phenomena that they attributed to evil spirits. The property was originally part of Navajo territory, but violent conflict arose in the early 19th century when the Ute tribe began capturing Navajo people and selling them into slavery to the United States. Historical documents from 1858 confirm that over 400 Navajo were sold in the Utah Territory during this period. As the Navajo were forcibly removed from their land between 1863 and 1866, tribal elders reportedly placed what became known as the Skinwalker curse on the territory. Takes a deep breath. This is where things get really dark, folks. According to Navajo legend, this curse involved powerful medicine men who had broken tribal taboos and gained the ability to transform into animals. They became Yenaldashai, or skinwalkers. These entities could take the form of predatory animals, particularly wolves and foxes, and were sent to torment anyone who dared occupy the cursed land. The Navajo people so feared even speaking of skinwalkers that many refused to discuss them with anthropologists or historians, believing that merely mentioning them could draw their attention. Local rancher Conrad Hatch purchased the land in 1905 and built the first permanent structures on the property. In a journal found in the Vernal County Records Office, dated October 12, 1911, Hatch wrote about losing 17 cattle in a single month to devil beasts that left no tracks and could not be shot. He abandoned the property in 1912, selling it for a fraction of its value. For generations afterward, successive owners of the property reported strange sightings of predatory animals exhibiting impossible behaviors. Wolves that couldn't be killed, coyotes that walked on hind legs, and foxes that seemed to vanish into thin air. Local Native American residents refused to set foot on the land, calling it the Path of the Skinwalker. By the 1970s, the name Skinwalker Ranch had stuck among locals, becoming synonymous with unexplainable phenomena in the region. After changing hands multiple times throughout the 20th century, with no owner staying longer than 7 years, the property was purchased in 1994 by cattle breeders Terry and Gwen Sherman. County records show they paid just $200,000 for the 512-acre ranch, less than half its market value, as it had been abandoned by the previous owners, the Wilson family, for nearly 3 years. The real estate agent handling the sale later admitted to a local newspaper that she was required by law to disclose that the property had a reputation, but didn't elaborate further. For the Shermans, who had been leasing grazing land at premium prices, the sprawling acreage of open range seemed like the perfect place for their growing cattle operation. Terry Sherman, 45 at the time, had spent his entire life ranching in Idaho and Wyoming. His wife Gwen, 42, worked part-time at a local bank while helping manage their family business. With their 2 children, a 12-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter, they saw the ranch as not just a business opportunity, but a legacy they could build for their family's future. It seemed too good to be true, Gwen later told a reporter from the Deseret News in 1996. Looking back, it absolutely was. On March 12, 1994, moving day, the Shermans were so excited about their new property that they initially overlooked several concerning details that would have sent most families running. Every window in the main house had deadbolts installed on both sides. not just to keep people out, but seemingly to lock something in. Internal doors between rooms featured heavy-duty locks on both sides, turning each room into a potential safe room or cell. In the master bedroom closet, they found a hidden door leading to a small, windowless room with no apparent purpose. Outside, they discovered large metal stakes driven into the ground near the doors with massive chains attached, the kind used for extremely powerful guard dogs. But these weren't normal stakes. They were reinforced and set in concrete footings, designed to restrain something far stronger than any conventional guard dog. In the shed behind the house, they found peculiar implements, iron bars bent into unnatural shapes, a collection of broken cameras, and a journal from the previous owner that had been burned, with only a few cryptic pages remaining. Among the few legible entries was one that simply read, "It's getting smarter, God help us." Tom Wilson, the previous owner, had left so hurriedly that he abandoned furniture, clothing, and personal items. Attempts by the Shermans to contact him were unsuccessful. Neighbors said he had moved his family to Arizona and refused to speak about the ranch. Most families would have questioned these unsettling security measures and abandoned items. But the Shermans were too excited about their new beginning to give these red flags proper consideration. Terry later told researchers that he assumed the previous owner had been paranoid or having mental problems. They were about to discover why the previous owners had gone to such lengths to secure the property and why no one had managed to stay there for more than a few years, since the early 1900s. That very first day, March 12, 1994, as the family unloaded their belongings from trucks into the homestead, Terry spotted what appeared to be an unusually large wolf approaching from the eastern tree line. It was approximately 3:15 p.m. According to Terry's later testimony to researchers, the ranch sat in the middle of open desert, allowing clear visibility in nearly all directions, and Terry could see this animal slowly making its way toward them in a serpentine path. It wasn't moving like a normal wolf, Terry later explained to NEDS investigators. It was weaving back and forth, almost like it was trying to hypnotize you with its movement. Terry's brother-in-law, Keith Davis, who was helping with the move, would later tell investigators, "I've hunted all my life. I've seen wolves, coyotes, you name it. This wasn't natural. The way it moved was calculated." As an experienced rancher who had dealt with predators throughout his career, Terry wasn't immediately alarmed. He calmly alerted his family to the wolf's presence, and they gathered near their truck to observe it. When the wolf passed near a fence on the property, Terry realized something impossible. Comparing the animal to the 6-foot gaps between fence posts, he estimated the wolf was at least 6 feet long and stood nearly 4 feet tall at the shoulder, 3 times larger than any normal wolf. By comparison, the largest wolves ever recorded in North America rarely exceed 180 pounds and stand about 33 inches at the shoulder. What happened next defies explanation and would set the stage for the terror that would follow the Sherman family throughout their time on the ranch. Despite the creature's alarming size, neither Terry nor his family members felt the fear they should have experienced. Instead, they stood transfixed as the massive wolf approached within 100 yards, wagging its tail like a domesticated dog. Strangely, they all reported feeling a sense that this creature wouldn't harm them. Later, when interviewed separately by researchers, all 5 people present described the exact same sensation, a feeling of calm and safety that made no logical sense given the circumstances. "It was like someone had turned off the part of my brain that should have been terrified," Gwen Sherman later explained. "I knew intellectually that I should be scared, but I just wasn't." The wolf approached Terry's father, Harold Sherman, who was 67 at the time, and even more bizarrely, allowed him to pet it at head level. Remember, this wolf stood as tall as a grown man. The creature seemed completely tame, rubbing against his hand before casually walking away. Harold, a Korean War veteran who had worked with animals his entire life, would later tell investigators that the wolf's eyes weren't right. They appeared too intelligent, almost human-like in their awareness. "I've never told anyone this part," Harold confided to NIDS researchers in 1997. "But when I looked in its eyes, I got the feeling it was enjoying this, like it was playing with us." Then, in an instant, everything changed. The wolf spotted a calf with its head through the pen fence and lunged at it, clamping its massive jaws around the calf's entire head. The family snapped out of their trance-like state and rushed to save their livestock. Terry ran to his truck and grabbed his .36 hunting rifle, a weapon powerful enough to take down an elk. He fired 3 shots directly into the wolf from less than 20 yards away, but the bullets had absolutely no effect. No blood, no flinching, nothing to indicate the animal had even been hit. His son, Tad, then 12 years old, grabbed a nearby axe and, showing remarkable courage, struck the animal repeatedly with the blunt end, yet it continued its attack unfazed. Keith Davis, Terry's brother-in-law, retrieved his own .357 Magnum handgun from his truck and fired twice into the animal's side at point-blank range. "I know I hit it," Keith later testified. "I could see the fur ripple where the bullet struck, but there was no blood, no reaction. It was like shooting a hologram." Eventually, after nearly 2 minutes of sustained attack from 3 people, the wolf seemed to lose interest in the calf and simply trotted off toward the nearby forest. The calf, miraculously, survived with only puncture wounds, though a veterinarian who examined it later said the bites should have crushed its skull, based on the jaw pressure evident in the wounds. Only after the wolf departed did the family notice a foul, chemical smell that permeated the area where it had been. Terry described it as like burned metal and rotten meat combined, a smell so distinctive that it would become a harbinger of strange events throughout their time on the ranch. Terry and his son immediately grabbed their rifles and tracked the creature into the woods. With Keith accompanying them, they followed its distinct prints in the muddy ground for approximately 400 yards, into a small ravine. Then, the track suddenly, inexplicably, stopped. There was no blood trail despite multiple direct hits at close range. Just footprints that abruptly vanished in the middle of a muddy area where tracks should have been clearly visible. It was like it just vanished into thin air, Tad Sherman told a local reporter in 1996. Dad and Uncle Keith just looked at each other. Nobody said anything for a long time. The 3 men searched the area for over an hour but found no further sign of the animal. As they returned to the house, Terry noticed something that would later take on greater significance. His compass was spinning wildly, unable to find north, a phenomenon that would repeat itself whenever strange events occurred on the property. I mean, imagine shooting something multiple times at close range and it doesn't even react. That would really make you question what you're dealing with, right? And this was just their first day on the property. Things were about to get much, much worse. Within the first week after moving in, Gwen began experiencing unexplainable events inside the house that initially made her question her own sanity. On March 15, 1994, 3 days after the wolf incident, she returned from a grocery shopping trip to the town of Roosevelt, about 20 miles away. She distinctly remembered unpacking all the groceries and putting them away in the kitchen cabinets and refrigerator, a routine task she had done thousands of times. "I walked into the living room to talk to Terry about dinner plans," Gwen later reported to researchers. "I was gone maybe 3 minutes. When I walked back into the kitchen, every single grocery item was back in the bags, arranged exactly as they had been when I brought them in from the car." Terry confirmed this account, stating that he had seen the empty bags on the counter when he passed through the kitchen minutes before. Neither of them had heard any sounds of movement. 2 days later, on March 17, 1994, Gwen hung her towel in the bathroom before taking a shower. When she finished bathing, the towel was gone. After dripping water through the house to retrieve another towel, she later found the original hanging neatly in a linen closet on the opposite side of the house, behind a door that had been closed and locked. "I started to think I was losing my mind," Gwen told NIDS investigators. "I've always been organized, methodical. I started wondering if I was having small strokes or early onset dementia. I was only 42, but I was genuinely scared there was something wrong with my brain." Gwen's medical records, which she later shared with researchers, show she actually visited a neurologist in Roosevelt on March 22, 1994, concerned about possible memory issues. The doctor found nothing abnormal and suggested stress might be causing her to be forgetful. But soon Terry began having similar experiences that confirmed they weren't dealing with a medical condition. On March 24, 1994, he was installing a new fence on the western perimeter of the property. He had been using a 70-pound post hole digger, a specialized tool for creating fence post holes. At approximately 2:30 p.m., he took a break to drink some water and rest in the shade of his truck. When he returned to continue working less than 10 minutes later, the post hole digger was gone. "I thought maybe I'd moved it and forgotten," Terry later recounted, "but it's not exactly something you can misplace. It's heavy, awkward to carry, and bright orange." He searched the area thoroughly, then drove back to the house to ask if anyone had seen it. No one had left the house. And given the distance from the home to where he was working, nearly half a mile, it seemed impossible that anyone could have taken it without him noticing. A week later, on April 2, 1994, while patrolling the property's perimeter for signs of the mysterious wolf, Terry spotted something unusual in a cottonwood tree, nearly a mile from where he'd been working on the fence. His 70-pound post-hole digger was suspended 70 feet high in the branches. The tool was wedged into a fork in the tree in such a way that climbing would have been required to place it there, and the lowest branches were more than 12 feet off the ground. "I stared at it for maybe 5 minutes," Terry said, "just trying to make sense of it. There was no way anyone could have placed it up there without specialized equipment. We're talking about a tool that takes 2 hands to carry comfortably." With considerable effort, Terry managed to knock the tool down using a long pole. When he examined it, he found something that chilled him. Carved into the wooden handle were 3 symbols that resembled Native American petroglyphs. The symbols hadn't been there when he was using the tool. As the family compared experiences over dinner that night, a disturbing pattern became clear. Something on this property was manipulating their environment in ways that defied explanation. The objects being moved weren't random. They were items the family had recently touched or used, almost as if something was observing them and interacting with the objects that held their interest. During those early weeks, the phenomena expanded beyond the relocation of objects. Terry began noticing lights appearing in the distance on his property at night. He kept a detailed journal, which NIDS researchers later studied, noting that between March 20th and April 15th, 1994, he observed unusual lights on 12 separate occasions. At first, he assumed they were vehicle headlights from trespassers who had made a wrong turn or were illegally hunting on his land. But when these lights appeared with increasing frequency, always in the same eastern section of the property, he decided to investigate. On April 16, 1994, at approximately 10:30 p.m., Terry spotted the lights again. Armed with his rifle and a powerful flashlight, he drove his truck toward the location. As he approached within about 500 yards, he cut his engine and continued on foot, using the darkness and terrain for cover. As he got closer, Terry realized something impossible. The lights, which looked exactly like headlights, made absolutely no sound. There was no engine noise, no people talking, nothing but the ambient sounds of the desert night. When he moved to within about 200 yards, he clearly saw what appeared to be 2 headlights hovering about 3 feet off the ground. "I thought maybe it was some kind of dune buggy or ATV," Terry later explained. But the lights were perfectly steady, not bouncing like they would be if a vehicle was on rough terrain. When he approached within about 100 yards, shining his flashlight toward the lights and calling out to identify himself as the property owner, something truly inexplicable happened. The lights began retreating at the same speed he was advancing, maintaining the exact distance between them. Then, without any sound or visible vehicle attached to them, the lights suddenly rose upward into the sky at tremendous speed and vanished. Terry was so shaken by the experience that he didn't tell his family about it immediately. Only when his son Tad independently reported seeing car lights that flew away 2 nights later did Terry share what he had witnessed. "You start to question everything," Terry confided to a NIDS researcher in 1996. "Your senses, your judgment, your sanity, but when your kid sees the same thing independently, you know it's real. That's when the fear really sets in." The strange lights prompted Terry to install motion-activated game cameras around the property, a decision that would lead to even more disturbing discoveries. I can't imagine how terrifying that would be. I mean, you think you're dealing with normal trespassers and then, wait, what? And the really freaky thing is that scientists later confirmed parts of this story through their own experiences on the ranch. That winter, Terry's cattle began disappearing one by one. When searching for a missing cow, he followed hoof prints into the same wooded area where the wolf had vanished months earlier. Like the wolf tracks before them, the cattle tracks simply ended abruptly in the soft ground. Throughout winter, 4 more animals disappeared without a trace, severely impacting the family's livelihood. Desperate to protect his remaining livestock, Terry began patrolling his property at night, hiding behind bushes with his rifle. During one of these vigils, he observed what he described as a small, silent craft shaped like a stealth fighter jet, hovering 20 feet above the ground along the tree line. The craft appeared to scan the ground with multicolored lights. When Terry accidentally made a tiny rustling sound, the object instantly went dark and turned directly toward his position, as if it had detected his presence with impossible sensitivity. After seemingly locating him, the craft silently flew away. By spring 1995, the situation had deteriorated dramatically. Not only were cattle disappearing, but some were returning days later with precision surgical incisions and missing organs. There was never any blood at the scenes, suggesting the procedures weren't performed where the animals were found. Poor animals. I can't imagine what they went through. At night, the family began seeing humanoid entities wandering their property. Beings Terry described as tall and featureless, lacking facial expressions. These entities would approach the house, place their hands against the windows, and peer inside. The family could hear them tapping on the glass and communicating in an incomprehensible language just outside their doors. Despite using the deadbolts on every door and window, the Shermans lived in constant fear. Their children's school performance suffered from lack of sleep, and Gwen lost her job at the bank due to sleep deprivation and increasing anxiety. The entire family was reaching a breaking point. One night, while sitting on his porch with his rifle, Terry witnessed an entirely new phenomenon. An orange, oval-shaped orb hovering in the distance. Looking through his rifle scope, he described seeing what appeared to be a portal with blue sky visible inside it, as if it were a window into daytime in another place. To his horror, he watched as a black humanoid figure crawled through this portal onto his property before scurrying into the tree line. The portal then closed and vanished. Soon after, blue orbs began appearing around the property. According to the family, these were the most terrifying manifestations of all. Anyone near these orbs experienced overwhelming anxiety and terror, feelings that disappeared as soon as the orbs moved away. One night, Terry's 3 guard dogs chased one of these blue orbs into the woods. He heard them yelping but was too frightened to investigate. The next morning, Terry and his son found 3 small piles of ash in burned circles where the dogs had vanished. The animals had apparently been completely incinerated. I hope he doesn't scare her and she runs into traffic or something. After reaching his breaking point, Terry decided to sell the ranch and shared his experiences with a local news outlet. As luck would have it, billionaire Robert Bigelow, who had invested millions in paranormal research, saw the story and purchased the property in 1996. Bigelow installed his scientific research team, the National Institute for Discovery Science, NIDS, on the ranch. These weren't paranormal enthusiasts, but skeptical scientists with advanced degrees, deliberately chosen for their rigorous approach. The NIDS team spent their first year ruling out environmental and psychological explanations. Finding no conventional explanation, they concluded the family had genuinely experienced something extraordinary. Terry stayed on as ranch manager, and one day while tagging new calves with his wife Gwen, they witnessed one of the phenomena firsthand. After tagging a calf and moving on to other tasks for about 40 minutes, they returned to find the animal precisely dissected, with only its legs and head remaining. The ear containing the identification tag had been removed. There was no blood at the scene. The NIDS veterinarian examined the calf and determined the incisions were made with surgical precision, not by predators. The researchers organized a search of the property and noticed their guard dogs at observation posts were all cowering and looking in the same direction. In the tree line, the entire team observed an enormous wolf-like humanoid creature perched on a branch. Terry fired at it, but it disappeared into the woods. The team followed but found only a few tracks before they vanished, along with that same metallic rotting odor others had reported when encountering the creature. In perhaps the most inexplicable incident, Terry and Gwen drove past a corral containing 4 valuable bulls, noting their presence before continuing to another area of the ranch. Upon returning later, they discovered the bulls were missing, though the corral gates remained locked. Nearby sat a small trailer that had been wired shut and unused for years. Looking through its window, Terry found all 4 massive bulls crammed inside the tiny space, calmly standing together despite the physical impossibility of fitting them all inside. When Terry called out to Gwen, the bulls seemed to snap out of a trance-like state and began panicking. Not only was it virtually impossible to get 4 bulls into such a small space, but the entrance to the trailer remained wired shut with intact cobwebs across the seams, indicating it hadn't been opened. The NIDS researchers discovered that sections of the corral's metal bars had become highly magnetized. While investigating magnetic anomalies elsewhere on the property, 2 researchers simultaneously detected that distinctive metallic odor. Their compasses pointed toward the smell rather than north, and both men reported feeling watched. After a few moments, the smell vanished, the feeling of being observed ceased, and their compasses returned to normal. One of the most chilling incidents occurred in late 1997, when 2 NIDS researchers, positioned on a ridge overlooking the homestead, observed an orange, oval-shaped portal forming near the house. Using infrared goggles, one researcher clearly saw a black humanoid figure crawl out of the portal and sprint up the hill directly past their position. They heard shale crunching under its feet as it ran by just 30 feet away, heading up into the mountains. By 1998, activity at the ranch decreased significantly. Although NIDS remained on the property, phenomena became increasingly rare, and by 2004, Bigelow ended the formal investigation. Despite years of research by qualified scientists, definitive proof remained elusive. The team collected hundreds of eyewitness reports, photographs of strange lights, evidence of unexplained magnetic anomalies, and documentation of mutilated animals, but nothing conclusive enough to satisfy scientific scrutiny. The researchers and the Sherman family all described feeling as though they were dealing with intelligent entities that stayed one step ahead of them, allowing only glimpses of their activity, but never enough to fully document or understand what was happening. The investigators never felt in control. Whatever was present at Skinwalker Ranch dictated the terms of engagement. Several books have been written by former NIDS team members who maintain that what they witnessed at Skinwalker Ranch represents one of the most credible cases of paranormal activity ever documented. To this day, the property continues to generate reports of unusual phenomena, though never again with the intensity experienced during the Sherman family's occupation and the subsequent scientific investigation. Thank you for watching Real Creepy Vids. I'll see you tomorrow night with more true stories that will keep you up wondering what's really out there.